according to our functionality, that totally if our functionality supports, then we can divide our functional processing in multiple hierarchy. For each hierarchy we will compute that precision recall, this type of metrics, and then we will cascade those hierarchical effects, and we will check the final recall. If it is acceptable, then we will accept the overall architecture. Now, that was a typical, as we mentioned, that type of, solution will be perfectly meaningful if we can actually apply any kind of hierarchy in our processing. It is application dependent. We talked about some kind of this type of okay Google, Alexa type of application where we can actually coin this type of keywords. We can make that NN prediction layer active, and then we can go for further processing. But that is a typical type of application. This is most generally the what we have discussed is the simplest solution. But always for other kinds of general application, it is not that we always can introduce hierarchy. Let's say we have taken these examples today. Okay, this is from biological domain. I also don't know exact meaning of this mass spectra or this components. This is totally biological domain, their concept, their compounds, and their particular components. Okay, so, but what I want to show that the same framework is also meaningful in this biological domain example also. So here you have multiple types of compounds. They are forming some mixtures, and those from that you are analyzing this type of mass spectra analysis of those mixtures, and these analysis results, maybe they are in form of some image you are getting as an input to your neural network domain. So when you are having your input and you have processed and you have got some process input that can be used for your NN model or CNN model. So in only this part is application specific or your domain specific. So maybe last day someone asked me that whether it is only, whatever we are discussing only possible for some signal analysis or some image analysis. Is it so? The point is that the analysis domain can be different. What type of classification result you are expecting, that will change also according to your application, according to your domain. But the general framework, this framework is same irrespective of any domain. Maybe you're from electrical, electronics, computer science, or maybe aerospace, water works. I don't know. There are multiple domains you have. So from whichever domain you come, this framework is same for everyone. So here in this domain, in this example, what we are doing from this compound, they are isolating that some principal component maybe. Okay, so for that they are passing those inputs, these process inputs, to their CNN framework. Then again you can see the same processing. They have finalized some inputs for the CNN and also finalized some weight, and then they are passing that to the convolution layer. Then you have some pooling layer. Then it is coming to this fully connected layer. This is the fully connected layer for prediction. There they have applied some activation function. This is sigmoid activation function. Now, when we talk about sigmoid activation function, we know we are expecting some result between 0 to 1, and according to that they have got some ranking of these components. Maybe based on that these biological applications or this example, they are doing some classification. Okay, so this framework is again same. Now, today what we are going to discuss, that when we have this type of CNN or DNN algorithm, and we want to optimize that for our embedded scenario, embedded processing scenario, we need to consider three general characteristics. We will focus on three general characteristics of such DNN or CNN network. Okay. What are those characteristics? First, we will focus on the data flow optimization. Okay, I will tell one by one what does it mean. Second one is the sparse optimization. Third one is the this is a very specific nature of neural network, that is the fault tolerance. Okay. Okay, so we will take one by one. So first one is the data flow optimization. What is that data flow optimization? That is, deep learning networks exhibit a very particular data flow with a large amount of potential parallelism and data reuse. Why? For every data flow means what? If you consider the operations, how your data is flowing from one operation from another operation. Whatever application, whatever example we have taken so far, or whatever application you can think of, you are actually putting or feeding, I can say, huge amount of data in this convolution layer. Then you are doing this convolution, activation function related operations, and then you are doing this pooling. So two things are constant. You are dealing with huge amount of input data, and you are dealing with some specific input. Now, when we are talking about this type of CNN examples, we are considering that weight in form of some filters and filter related weights. And when we are talking about neural networks, maybe this weights are straightforward. But in whichever case you think, in either in case of DNN or in CNN, you are dealing with the flow is same. These flow is same. Okay, and here you are dealing with huge amount of data and huge amount of input. Okay, and we will see some specific nature to that, specific characteristics to that, and how we can exploit parallelism, how we can improve. Infer some improvement from there. These type of features. Okay. Okay. This part, what we are actually trying to discuss, that we have just summarized here. We will discuss these bullets one by one. First one is that from data flow, that we are handling huge weights and huge data. The second one is we are handling with large sparsity. Okay. Sparse matrices or sparse values. That means many parameters become very small or even equal to zero after network training. Okay. It may happen these zero values coming from your weight, or these zero values are coming from your input. Okay. Now we will see how after data flow optimization, how these zero values, I have huge layers, huge amount of weights, huge amount of inputs, but few of them are zero. So two things will be there. We will discuss how we can exploit them, what advantage I can get if I have some zero values in my network. And second one, it is not like for this example, sorry, it is not possible to get always these zero values. So is there in some technique how you can get these zero values, or you can restrict some values like weight? If you have a huge weight, if you can restrict them in some way, and for that, what type of optimization benefits we can get? Okay. Then robust to approximation. So this is a feature, another feature of deep learning network, that it is robust to approximation. That means in a very simpler way, let's say you have some weight values, a very huge weight values, maybe with some 64-bit values. Okay, bit values. Or better example we can take, you have some floating weights. Weight values are like this: 3.2, 5.6, and so on. Some floating points weight values you are getting. Now, for your ease of computation, what you are doing, you are chopping these floating points and you are mapping them to, let's say, some integer values, 3, 5, and so on. So you are just considering the integer values. You are not mapping those floating point values to some integer values. That way, you are modifying your network. Maybe it is a CNN filter values, say weight values, or DNN weight values. So you are modifying these weight values and chopping out the parts, I mean floating parts, and mapping them to integers. So with that, of course, that is one approximation. That means you are not working with exact values. You are making some approximation. Now, when you are, that means somewhere you were supposed to multiply with maybe 3.2 into some input I. Here you are multiplying with C into I. So we will check how these approximations we can do and what are the benefits of this approximation we can get in our overall implementation or in our overall network realization. Okay, so three characteristics in this case we will focus on. We will take the look, whatever we have discussed about a neural network, those features, those convolution, those pooling, the same things we will revisit again, and we will just focus on these 3 points, that how we can optimize the data flow. If we get some zero weights or zero inputs, how we can exploit that as a benefit. And the third one is what will be the effect of approximation. Like if we map some floating point to integer point, am I getting some accurate classification? First of all, how much my accuracy is getting, getting reduced. Second one, if it is not getting reduced much, what advantage this type of approximation I can get. So mostly we will discuss in these 3 points. Okay. And based on that, like what we have discussed before, you remember we discussed about DSP processes in detail. Maybe that time you found it too boring, that why it is we are talking about so many things about a processor. But we will see the advantages of realizing these your neural network if we have that much knowledge about a particular processor. So when we are talking about custom accelerators, basically what designers do, they merge these two knowledges together. They have the knowledge of those type of processors, existing processors, and they have the knowledge of the networks. These three key points, networks on these three key points, and they exploit these knowledges and they try to design one custom accelerator where your neural network, maybe for this implementation, okay, let's say in a doctor's clinic you are having one embedded device. That embedded device is just taking this compound inputs, just modifying it by they are having some equipment to generate this mass spectrum. They're doing this analysis. This input they are feeding to this CNN model, and they are doing this prediction in their own clinic. They are not going somewhere. They are not buying some huge devices, huge servers. No, they are having one embedded device. In that embedded device, the doctor or the lab person, he is doing that experiment within a few seconds, minutes, or maybe few hours, depending on your timing requirement. So what modification you will do in your CNN model that you can support these type of flexibility. So when we are talking about this type of embedded machine learning or embedded deep learning, it is not about only about our wearable device. It is not about our luxury of having OK Google or Alexa. It is about enhancing your lab experience, enhancing your experimental experience also. Okay, so in this point, how they can help, or how we can exploit, we will see that in today's discussion, maybe some part of it. Okay, now the first, as we mentioned, that ASIC means application specific integrated circuit. You are developing one chip of your own, one IC of your own, which will only run these applications. Let's say only this application it will run. It will predict. It will perform the prediction. That is your objective. Okay. So for that, most of the ASICs they are targeting. They are targeting to execute this type of DNN prediction part in that embedded scenario. Okay. So for that, to improve the prediction time and the prediction accuracy, first thing what they target, they want to exploit large degree of parallelization. Okay. Now, if we remember that in our CNN computation, what we know, we talked about that we have to do typical multiplication and addition. If you also forgot the basic CNN operation, I can show you again. Maybe we'll discuss this type of function you are doing, and that is the most costly part. We have seen these type of matrix, huge matrix multiplication I have to do, and there I have some weight, I have some input values, and repeatedly I am adding. Maybe one bias part is not shown here, so sometimes bias is also required. So this multiplication and this addition. So for that, when we discuss in DSP processor, we talked about map, multiply and add and multiply and accumulation unit. And for that map, we talked about just one map there. Basically, we are having multiple large degree to support multiple large degree of parallelization. We have these type of multiple map arrays. Addition, multiplication, multiple arrays are there. And this is a customized application specific integrated circuit. Application specific IC. That means this IC, Google, basically the example we have taken from Google's recent tensor processing unit. Okay, Google's TPU. Maybe you have heard about TPU, that is very effective when we talk about machine learning or deep learning algorithms when we want to run them. If you are, doing any machine learning or deep learning, any other course, when you are taking any example, we are trying to model something, trying to train something, specifically for training, because training is a costly part compared to the prediction. There, the underlying processor you will choose, if you're using from Google platform, you choose then this Google's recent this tensor processing unit, the TPU. It is an extreme example of supporting this huge number of maps, and this is a huge number of maps can help you. You can understand in parallel. Basically, it is helping to multiply and add this. What we say? 1 second. Multiply and add to map these operations to their tensor process. Tensor processing unit. So that means whenever we are we are targeting to realize this type of huge DNN, we are choosing or developing any particular IC, any platform, any embedded device. We will see whether this map array feature is there or not. Okay. That is coming from our algorithmic knowledge. From our embedded hardware platform knowledge. But the problem here is it is not enough. Like you have designed one model and you are just using one CPU and you are you are using CPU as an underlying processor and you are implementing there. You need to have some knowledge about the associated memory also. Okay, where your data and input, those are stored. Why those associated memories are important? Because you understand that you are actually dealing with huge amount of data, right? You are actually storing that huge amount of weight and weight amount of input. But it is not always possible. Like you are using a small chip or small IC. They have some restrictions in terms of RAM, the memory you are having in that IC, in your IC, in your chip, you have some amount of RAM. Okay, RAM. But that RAM is very much restricted in size because you are working in an embedded scenario. So that means that chip RAM cannot store all your weights, all your data, input data. It is not possible. So that means when you are talking about on-chip RAM, you can see you this is maybe those are of few MBs. Okay. Whereas you are actually dealing with few GBs of data. So where will you store that data? You have to store them into some off-chip RAM. Okay. From that off-chip RAM, you have to fetch that data. You have to take that in your IC, and that with that IC, the RAM, that data will be given to this MAC array. This MAC array, we will do that multiplication for you, and then finally it will going on through that pooling layer, activation layer, etc., etc. You will get your final output. Okay. So the challenge what I was mentioning here, it is not enough to have this. Maybe you have this 64,000 maps. That means you can have 64,000 parallel processing. It is also dependent on how many amount of data, how many inputs. Basically, this maps are taking inputs, that is your weight values, and your input values, right? So how much amount of data your this RAM is actually holding, your memory is actually holding. Because if that data is not in the memory, you cannot give the input in spite of the fact that you are having the processor, you are having that hardware. You cannot give input to this MAC array. Is this part clear? What is the challenge? Everybody. So let me ask if you have any question, or just stop me, okay? So the problem is, in spite of the fact you have that MAC array, you have that huge processor, or you have the support of parallelism, but to get, I mean, to use that MAC array or use that underlying hardware, you need to have the understanding how your data is actually getting stored in your RAM. Okay, that means it will be good. Now your RAM is also restricted. You have some amount of restrictions that you cannot have huge memory in your IC or in your embedded system. So here comes the concept of temporal and spatial locality. I will first tell you the concept, and then I will tell you that how it is meaningful in our case. Okay. Maybe most of you coming from, electronics or computer science department, they have some idea, maybe some repetition for them. But still, I think it is important to revisit again. Okay, so when we are talking about temporal data locality, this is our motivation, that most realistic deep neural networks require huge weight and input. Okay, maybe sometimes in terms of gigabytes, and it is impossible to feed them on chip memory. Okay, so what is the solution? Maybe what is the basic concept of temporal or spatial liquidity? Just see this way. When you have some processing unit, maybe here you can see this. This is maybe it is a general CPU. These diagrams are from general CPU concept, but this whole goes exactly similarly in our MAC array also. So MAC array, this is your CPU now. This is your processing unit. You can think this is your processing unit, like this one. This processing unit is trying to do this MAC and accumulate computation, right? So for that MAC and accumulate computation, you have the underlying hardware, but you need the data. So your processing unit will try to fetch the data from your main memory, your on-chip memory. Okay. Now for on-chip memory, there are two things. This on-chip main memory can be bigger of size, and to search some data and to fetch and store that data in that main memory, that is costly. Okay, so this part, so you can see here the CPU to main memory, this access is slow. This is performance cost. You need very huge time. That's why to reduce that, we have one cache memory that is smaller. This memory is smaller and faster. Okay. So what the CPU will do, or your processing unit will first do, it will first attempt to find the data in the smaller memory. And if it is getting the data successfully, and it is using that in its processing for its next level processing, that situation we mention as it as cache hit. That means successfully you are getting the data in cache memory by just searching a small memory you are getting. So you can understand the gain, rather than you are searching in a huge main memory where the access the data fetch and data stored for everything, the access is really slow. Okay, so in the first attempt you are getting, you are lucky, you are getting the data from cache memory, you are taking it. If you are not getting the data, that situation we consider as cache miss. That is also possible because this cache memory is smaller in size than main memory, and some partial data. We are not going to discuss about that cache mapping. Maybe we discussed a bit before, but detailed discussion is not possible in this class. But from main memory it is big, and this cache memory it is small. So you have huge data, but some partial data is getting mapped to this cache memory. So you understand, in cache memory also it is very small memory. Amount of data you can store there, that is also even more restricted. So when you are getting the data in the cache memory, that is very good. You are fetching that. If you are not getting that data and there's a cache miss, of course you have to get some data, identify some data in this main memory, and you have to fetch that data to that cache memory, and then your processing unit will access that data from the cache memory. Now, since cache memory is smaller, of course, you cannot copy the whole main memory data to cache memory data. You have some restrictions. So, what you are doing? Some part of data of main memory data you are copying to cache memory, and if you need some extra data, that time some part of cache memory data you are taking back to this main memory, and some new block of data, maybe some new block coming from the cache main memory is replacing this cache memory. Okay. So when there is a cache miss, basically there are these steps happening. That CPU is requesting to main memory, it is fetching some data to cache memory, and it is replacing when this we are considering that cache memory size is not so huge. It is obvious it cannot be. So we are replacing some blocks from cache memory. Okay. If this is going on, now think with this example, simple example. Okay. When you are actually running this type of a loop in your program, you are coding your neural network, you are actually realizing your network on a particular process. Okay. So when you are accessing first A0, then you are trying, you obviously based on that you will access A1 and so on. This is one thing. But each time you are doing this sum plus, that means each time you will access this sum. Here also in the next iteration, again you will access this sum and so on. That means for this loop to execute, you need to have two things. One thing is that for a particular, let's say sum is, this is your cache memory and your sum is here. Okay, this is your sum. That means first one thing is that you are accessing repeatedly this location. The same data, I mean location data coming from the same location is getting used repeatedly. And the second one is when you are accessing A0, then you are using the A1 data, next you are using A2 data and so on to execute the loop. Okay. Now, when we are talking about this cache memory, main memory, etc. mapping, if we do that in such a way that when we are repeatedly accessing this sum in our computation, no need to replace this sum block. when we need to replace some block, we will be careful not to replace this block which is holding this sum value, because we know in the next iteration again we are going to access that sum value, and for that if we are replacing that block, we have to again fetch that from main memory. Correct? Is it clear? So if this is the case, that means we are considering that we will keep that sum block, a block dedicated to that is holding the value of sum in the cache memory. And also, whenever we are fetching some data, maybe there is a cache miss. Whenever we are fetching some data from main memory, maybe there is a cache miss for A0. We know for that A0, next data will be A1. So let's fetch them together. Okay. So whenever we are fetching any sending any dealing with a particular memory location, let's fetch the associated memory locations also. Okay. So based on that, there comes to these type of concepts, that is called one called temporal locality and another called spatial locality. In case of temporal locality, the data is stored in the cache and we are repeatedly accessing them. Okay. In this case, nearby data stored in the cache and we are accessing them. And when we are fetching one data from main memory, we are also fetching the nearby data value, so that whenever we are going to access in the next iteration, we are going to do some operation with this AI value. We are not again going to search that, we are not again facing any cache miss, and then we are not going to again search in the main memory and then we are going to fetch the block. So if we can if our hardware supports this type of functionality, this type of decision making, of course you can understand this is not so straightforward. It is not required for all the blocks or all your processors or processing or all your functionality. For a specific functionality, if your underlying hardware can make this decision, okay, I will analyze this code, and if the spatial or temporal locality, this type of support is required, this hardware will give you that support. Okay. So when we are talking about spatial locality, that means reference array elements in succession we are actually accessing. When we are talking about temporal locality, we are actually accessing the reference of this sum repeatedly. Okay. And this is decision making, whether I need the successive values or whether need a particular value or not. Based on that, if we are getting any temporal or spatial support, you can understand that will help us to improve the performance of executing this type of operations. Is this example clear for everybody, especially those students who are coming from maybe electrical or some other background? Is it clear, or should I repeat this again? Everybody, can you hear me first of all? Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Is it clear? Do you have any doubt? Because if you understood that this part, you will it will be clear to you why I'm talking so much about this temporal and spatial locality and what is its importance in our neural network. You can see now what operation you are doing in your CNN computation. You can see, sorry, you can see here this computation. You can see here this computation. Here you are actually repeatedly accessing, like the example we have taken for this sum. This like this, now you map this sum value to your this intermediate value, what you are computing in this convolution layer. And whatever you are this AI value, basically this AI, it is it when you are accessing this A0 then A1. Similarly, if you now change this indexes, this KX, this KY, these indexes, basically you are for your input as well as for your weight, you are basically somewhere you are actually trying to fetch this successive references, one by A0 then N1, that way I0 then I1 then I2, based on your channel, based on your values of filters, based on your values of this filter width and height. These km, these values will change, that's all. But the I mean, based on your application, of course, these values, filters, everything will change. But whatever, doesn't matter whatever application you take, doesn't matter whatever domain you are working on, these particular data flow type, that you have to do this type of multiplication and repeatedly you have to store. For that, it will be good if you have this type of support, or I mean, if you are actually getting any support of this temporal locality and spatial locality, where automatically your hardware will understand that you are going to access the next successive value, or whether your hardware will understand, it will detect that you are going to repeatedly access a particular location. Then let's store them in cache. That will save you in terms of your cache miss time. That will, I mean, your, that will, or in other way we can tell, that will increase the cache hits. Repeatedly, whenever you are searching the sum in your cache memory, you are directly getting it and you are directly mapping that to this MAC array and you are executing. That's all. If you are not getting that cache memory, then you are having the, I mean, you are getting the penalty of this cache miss, and that will be added to your performance, that performance in terms of I mean timing requirement. Otherwise, if you can add this temporal locality and spatial locality, these features, your hardware, their custom accelerator or custom hardware is actually supporting them, then you can gain in terms of this cache. So that is the concept. That's why I mean, we tell that whenever we are considering this type of CNN based or DNN based, whatever it may be, there's type of data flow, we should explore this data reuse, because whenever we are reusing something or we are using something in succession, we can actually get the effect of, enjoy the effect of this temporal and spatial locality. And that way here in your algorithm also, in CNN computation also, you can actually take any value in your home. You can do this assignment. You can take any value, standard values of the channel values, take the values of M, take the values of C, and you can actually, by pen and paper, you can compute it, can check that every weight parameter is reused approximately m square times. Basically, from here also you can see every parameter is this, for this m square loop, you are basically getting this weight parameters are getting reused. And also every input data point is also reused in different slices. Okay. So you are getting, basically, if you can arrange this way, or if you can gain incorporate the concept of this temporal and spatial locality when you are coding or when you are designing your custom accelerator, both in those cases you can enjoy the performance improvement. Performance, I'm not talking about it here in terms of accuracy. What I'm talking performance in terms of timing requirement. It will save your time, save your computation, I mean, data fetch, data store, those computations. And if it is saving in that term, that means you are saving in terms of energy. Basically, what you are doing repeatedly, you have some data in cache memory, you are fetching that, you are operating. Okay, this is your Mac. If this is easier, if you are missing that, that means again you are searching, that there will be one false search in this cache memory. Then again you are doing some operation on that main memory, and then you are taking the data back in your cache memory. So you are doing some these type of extra operations. And remember our previous day's discussion, whenever we are doing some extra operation, basically we are adding up some energy. So this is one way how we can save energy when we are basically dirt of energy, and we know that our this huge computation, some of which requires huge amount of data, huge amount of computations, and that in turn is incurring huge amount of energy that is not suitable with to go as per our existing embedded platform. Okay, so this is one important concept, that is how we can exploit the data reuse. Okay. So why I'm telling that, whenever you are coding your neural network, this convolution layer maybe, if we are coding this way, we are repeatedly storing these values here, and because we want to exploit that spatial or temporal locality. If you would have been coding in some separate way, maybe you would have been stored these values in some intermediate variable, and then you are using that, copying that to some other variable, maybe some other way of coding there, this type of, because that time it may happen that you are not exploiting that temporal or spatial locality features so much, and in that case that will may increase in terms of performance time. I mean, that will increase your required time, that will increase your required number of computations and required number of energy also. Okay, so this way when you are coding your neural network, this part you should keep in mind, that whether you are repeatedly using this locality of references or not. Okay, so this is one concept. We will just quickly talk about some simpler continuations of this. So now you know that you have multiple weights and multiple inputs. As we have told us initially, that weights are getting reused as inputs are getting reused. So based on this concept, we can actually load some weights. We can actually, when we are coding or when we are implementing our neural network, what we can do, we can load our, we can first analyze the network. Okay, then we can check for which weights we are doing the multiplication for same weights, but inputs are different, or the other way around. We can check for multiple inputs when weights are same. Based on that, we have targeted different types of implementation or different types of way of realizing our network. The first one is shown here. It is input stationary. That means you are loading one input. Okay. And then on that input, you are changing the weights. As you have seen that this every weight parameters, that is also getting reused, and every input data point is also getting reused. Okay. Basically, you can see here, whenever you are applying this filter here, again you are applying one stride, then another filter you are using here. So here you are using the input point. So you are taking the input as stationary, and in parallel you are applying the weight. Okay. That way you are getting some output. So of course, here you are enjoying the temporal locality reference, temporal locality advantage in terms of input. Okay. Whereas if you are going the other way around, that is, you are keeping variable inputs and you are fixing to one weight. That is also possible, because here you have seen that we are reusing the weights also. So you have chosen those weights, and you have for those weights that are that we are going to apply from multiple inputs, and you are fixing those weights, and you are changing the inputs, and there then you are getting the output. These computations you are doing together just to enjoy the temporal locality. Okay. Next comes the output stationary. Okay. Output stationary, you are not concerned about the input weights or output input weights and input values, input matrix values. You are only thinking, because whenever you are doing in this way, you are just chosen some weights and multiple weights, and you are applying them to same input values. Of course, you have intermediate way, you have to store them to get the final input. That way, you need some huge bandwidth or some storage, extra storage to handle your output. If that is not possible, then you are only focusing on the output. You are taking inputs, you are taking weight, and then you are computing the output. So that no intermediate storage is required to store your output. Or the fourth one is the hybrid one. So of course you can understand, for in each cases you have some advantages. When you are fixing the weight to a single weight, that means your weight is stationary, your weight bandwidth is low, but your input and other output bandwidth is high, or storage requirement is also high, and vice versa. When you are putting this input as stationary, you are taking one single input, your input requirements are input storage requirements, input memory requirements, input bandwidth requirement, input fetch time requirement from memory, everything is low. But here your weight related and output related, those requirements are high. Okay, so that way we have chosen three types of implementation. One is weight parallel, one is weight stationary, and one is output stationary. So just you can go through it once. In the weight parallel or input stationary approach, the same input data is multiplied with several weights of different output channels of the layer. Ideally, every input will only be loaded once into the system, and that is the advantage. Okay. Negative repercussions on the weight memory bandwidth, as the weights have to be reloaded frequently every time a new input is applied. Of course, the weight is changing here. Okay. The accumulation of output cannot be done across different clock cycles. That means whenever you are, like in this case, when you are considering output stationary, you are taking the weight, you are taking the input, and you are accumulating the output. But in these two cases, that is not possible. Okay. So that way it is impacting, some way you are gaining and some way you are losing, based on how many weights you are considering, based on what will be the input size, what will be your weight size. So based on that, you can choose any one of the options, or some way you can go with hybrid. We will see some example in one practical neural network implementation scenario. I wish there we will see that how this hybrid structures work good. But these are the options we have when we are going to implement our neural network or our CNN, and we are considering temporal locality or spatial locality advantages in mind, and we are trying to reduce the timing, memory fetch, memory store. These timings we are trying to reduce. Okay. Similarly, for weight stationary, as we mentioned, that weight is stationary and inputs are varying. So the advantage is that we are loading the weight once, and there we are gaining in terms of temporal locality. Similarly, for the output stationary, where we are computing the, here this is not a concept of temporal or spatial locality, but what we are doing, we need some extra storage to handle this intermediate output result, and on top of that we are working on it. Okay. So if we can support that output stationary, then at a particular clock cycle, in a single clock cycle, we are considering reloading those weights and inputs, and we are performing on them. Okay. So based on, so the this way, when we are talking about any, as we started talking about some custom accelerator, when we are talking about any custom accelerator or our embedded platform that will be suitable for our neural network implementation. So not only we can just increase the hardware, like we can just support multiple Macs, and then multiple, we can increase the number of MAC arrays, and then we can have a guarantee that okay, we can gain much. Along with that, we have to also understand the networks that can be trained here, their structure, in which way their weights and inputs are coming, and the sizes of memory in the hierarchy. If you think about the hierarchy also that we discussed in the previous day, that we have divided that our functionality in multiple hierarchy. But now also you need to understand that what will be the memory requirement for your each hierarchical level. For each hierarchy also you have to do the same thing. You have to handle those inputs. You have to handle those weights. So what will be the sizes of the memory requirement? Maybe that is, last year we only talked about precision and recall, that much only. But this memory requirement, that may be another maybe feature, maybe a metric. Based on that, maybe you have to divide that hierarchy again to some sub blocks or sub layers. Okay. So here the both the advantage you will only get if you actually having the knowledge of sizes of memory, and also the nature of your network, and if you are jointly optimizing them, then only you can get in term with the degree of parallelization you are supporting. Okay. So both the points you have to keep in mind: degree of parallelization that you are getting from your hardware, and the memory hierarchy. Along with that, the memory requirement you have, that you have to understand by studying your network. Okay. So this is one concept. Okay. Now I will just start this. Okay. Just a few points I will talk about. So here we have talked about this MAC array, right? This MAC array is actually doing the helping in your processing. This is the addition and multiplication block, and you have arranged them in a series, or you have arranged in blocks, and there you are applying some parallelism. You are expecting some parallelism. So basically, when we talk about multiple processing units, we sometimes talk that as distributed deep learning, where distributed processing is a setup in which multiple individual processing units that is working on the same program. Okay. So in this case, we explore the ways to parallelize and distribute these basic operational blocks. We will talk more about distributed deep learning later, but just why I am telling this, because just to explain this diagram a bit, because when you go through that book, there you will get one term that is called systolic processing. Okay. Just don't get confused, because systolic processing is nothing but this well-designed memory hierarchy and well-designed underlying ALU hierarchy, ALU, or what to say, arithmetic logic unit, because this is a computing unit hierarchy, you can think. So you have this well-designed hierarchy, as well as you have this MAC array where you have arranged your supporting units in a well designed array type of concept, where this, if you consider this one MAC block, maybe this is one MAC block M1, M2, and so on, M3. These are arranged in a pattern, maybe up to Mn you have these blocks. These are arranged in a pattern, and among them this timing to data transfer, that is constant. Okay, you have some dedicated structure, well defined structure in your distributed processing. Your processing elements are not haphazard. It is not like one is here, one is here, one is here, nothing like that. You don't know what will be the data transfer time from this block to this block. That is not the case. Here, this is a very defined, well defined structure between a proper hierarchy between this memory and also in this MAC array. And when you have this systolic processing, what is happening here? This is your input feature macro, okay, and it is your filtered inputs coming. So this is blue and green. So from this blue part, that means input features are coming to your one processing element, and this row, that is filter matrix, is coming to your one processing element. And then your each processing element is actually giving the output of some partial sum, okay, or some partial result, and that part you are getting added or getting computed, and yeah, that part is acting as the input of your next processing element. Now why do you require that? Again, you go back to your this structure. When you go back here, you can think that this multiplication, and then in previous value of this output, this is getting mapped to one processing element, and in parallel these processing elements are, some parts are parallel and some parts are depending on their previous input, but this way they are in this organized way, these maps are working together. You can see here with this example, if you have this input feature map, you are breaking this in this way, and these are the one processing, maybe based on some rows, and these processing input is just processing this part, then it is sending this way this value to this next processing unit, I mean next processing level, and that way you are processing your first row of output feature map. So that way, when you are dividing this processing elements with this systolic processing, basically these arrangement, this systematic arrangement of processing elements, we consider as systolic processing. And with the systolic processing, we get the first row output of output feature map. Okay, so this is the concept of systolic processing, the term you may get in your book, and you can understand that this is nothing but a way of some parallel processing inside your MAC arrays, or using your MAC arrays. Now the next concept is, it is good that if we are having some repeated weights, or you are getting some repeated inputs, we can exploit the temporal or spatial locality. But the best part will be if we are not having any weights at all, or what I mean to say, if this weight I know is 0, if this is 0, then we can, this input multiplication is not at all required, because multiplying with 0, anything with 0 will be, it will be 0. So this part, this multiplication at all will not be required. So it is good if we can get something like that, like some weights are 0, then we can gain in terms of course, you can understand that again we can save some energy if we are getting some weight 0 values. Now, this is the example of AlexNet, the AlexNet network. You know what are the layers, what are the processing components of AlexNet. It is shown that this is shown the typical sparsity, the mean sparsity based on some fixed point precision. We will talk more about this precision later when we talk about this quantization. But based on some techniques, what I mean to say, we can actually incur some sparsity. It is good if we are getting automatically. If we are getting some weights values as 0, that is good. We can directly cancel those operations and we can proceed. So that way we can save some energy. But the next thing is that if we are not getting that, then few techniques we can apply to make our network sparse or to compress our network, where we can reduce some amount of when we can reduce some amount of required computation. So what are those techniques we will be discussing in detail? One is pruning and one is quantization. Maybe some of you, those have already done some ML courses. Can you tell me what is pruning? Anybody? We will discuss in detail. Don't worry. Anyone? What do you understand by pruning? Have you heard this word pruning?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I guess
So what?
to avoid overfitting, we do pruning, as far as I've heard.
Okay. How? I mean, how? Maybe you are correct. Sometimes we improve our accuracy. We do pruning. Okay. Then how? What do you mean? What do you do actually?
We removed few pieces, like few things. I don't know. Like I have heard it in the context of decision
The
trees.
parameters, I guess.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Someone else is telling. Yeah. Tell me. Yeah.
I guess we remove some of the parameters.
You remove some of the parameters. Okay. What parameters?
Maybe like I don't know very explicitly, but like maybe if there are too many weights and biases, then we can make some of them zero to avoid overfitting.
Correct. So do you have any idea how can we do that?
No, ma'am.
Okay, 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 no problem. We will discuss that in detail. Okay. So next tomorrow, basically today, Gautam will what is the time? We'll start about this showing you that your assignment, etc. So we will talk about pruning in detail. So pruning is a process of maybe this definition you have someone of you have you actually heard. It is the process of removing weight connections. Now we have talked about that if we can remove this weight, okay, we can gain. Now you can understand how we can gain. At least I think that is clear. If we can remove some weight, means we can set some weight as zero. Of course we can remove this type of operations. We can remove some processing elements will be free. Okay, no need, because we know that when weight is zero, whatever you multiply with that weight zero, it will come to zero. So no need to do this multiplication. That way we can save. So that is the advantage of pruning. Why we do pruning? Okay, that is one thing. The accuracy part we will talk later. At this initially we will discuss mostly focus on this. We are trying to make our network sparse or compress. Compression means mostly we talked about in quantization, and in pruning we will talk how we will use this concept to make our network sparse. Okay, so just by definition, I'm just telling you definition, and then I will leave. Pruning is the process of removing weight connections in a network to increase inference speed. Okay. Now, of course, you can understand, I think, how this inference speed can be improved in some way. I will tell the way tomorrow, but some way we can remove weight connections. This part is clear, right? I hope. Anybody, are you having any doubt that if we can remove weight, how we can increase the inference? That is the basic definition of pruning. At least this part, I think you can understand that some way if we can remove that weight connection, we can increase the inference speed. How we can inference speed, this part is clear, right? That we have discussed today. Clear? Yes or no? Any answer? Anybody?
Yes, ma'am. Clear.
Okay. So next day we will see how can we remove that one thing. And of course, this one also you have understood that if you are removing that, or that it is increasing the inference speed, and second one, it is decreasing the model storage size. Why it is decreasing? Because you are just you no need to store those inference weight values. So that way it is storing the storage size. That means you are not it is not required to here again this weight if it is zero, this filter matrix maybe this if it is zero, you are not allocating any memory. So it is actually reducing the storage size. So I think the objective of pruning, why we do it, that is basically coming from these this discussion. So I think why we do pruning, hope that is clear. If not, just go through it, ask me next day. And next day we will see how we can do pruning and which way we can actually remove some wet connections. Okay, so here I will stop now, because for assignment related discussion that is so important and it is pending from last week. So Gautam, are you there?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I will stop sharing my screen. So can you take
Okay.
over now? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, you can take over. You can share your screen and show it.
Yeah, ma'am.
Yeah, yeah,
Is my screen visible?
yes.
Yeah, okay. So, in continuation to our last discussion, so have you guys started reading the book? Hello? Is there any doubt from the previous session? Hello? Am I audible?
Yes, Gautam, you're audible. For others, can you explain? I mean, answer to him. If you have any doubt, you can ask him. Have you tried that? First of all, have you
First
set
of
up?
all, yeah. Have you started reading the book at least?
Not a full book. At least the. Have you tried to do the go through the example that he had shown last time? Yes. No.
Yes, ma'am. I tried building a CNN using TensorFlow.
Okay. Okay. Then Gautam, you
Okay.
continue. Maybe they
Yeah.
will ask questions
Yeah.
if you have any. Yeah.
So you were so last day last in the last session I shown that blinking LED. So actually your assignment will be on this wake word detection. So here I will be just giving you an glimpse of what we actually do. So so when coming to wake word detection, so as you know, in most cases, the heavy lifting of the speech recognition and this generating responses to users' query is done in the cloud. That is on the powerful servers running on large ML models. So we can't run these large ML models in our edge devices because of these constraints, resource constraints. So when a user asks a question, actually it is sent to the server as a stream of audio. The server figures out what it means and looks up any required information and sends the appropriate response back. So whenever so you just the user just asks a query in the form of audio, and that audio stream of audio is sent to the server, and the server figures out what it means, and it just sends the appropriate response back to the user. So although it's easy to do speech recognition on a server, but it's not feasible to send a constant stream of audio from a device to a data center, because one of the reason is like the privacy perspective, and also the network communication also uses energy. So sending a constant stream of data would quickly drain the device battery. So that's where this TinyML comes into the picture. So as you know, the only audio the assistant really needs is what immediately follows the wake word. For suppose, hey Google. So, so what if we could just detect that word without sending the data, but start streaming when we heard it? So it would save us the battery life, and also we will be able to protect the user privacy. So and this is where the TinyML comes into the picture. So what we basically do is we can train a tiny model that listens for a wake word, and it runs on a low power chip. So if we embed this in a phone, so it can listen for all wake words all the time, but it when it hears the magic word, so then it can inform the phone's operating system, so which can begin to capture the audio and send it to the server instead of listening to the wake all the time and wasting the battery's life. So we can basically make use of this TinyML. So whenever it just listens to the wake word, so it informs the phone's operating system, and we can just begin to capture the audio and send it to the server. So the model which I'm going to show is trying to recognize the words yes and no, and it is also capable of distinguishing between unknown words and silence or background noise. So our application will listen to its surroundings with a microphone and indicate when it has detected a word by lightning and LED, or it may depending on the capability of the device, or you may display the data on a screen on an LCD. So basically, this application architecture, the following blocks are there. First, we start with this main loop. Just like the hello world example, it just application runs in a continuous loop. So it runs as fast as the microcontroller can run them. So there is an audio provider here. So the audio provider basically just captures the raw audio data from the microphone. So because the methods for capturing audio may vary from device to device, so this component is device specific. And when it comes to the future provider, here we just convert the raw audio data into the spectrograms. I will come to what spectrogram really means. So spectrograph format that our model requires. We don't feed the actual audio signals. They are converted into the spectrograms, and we just feed it to the model. And this TF Lite interpreter, as from the previous discussion, it just runs on the TensorFlow Lite model, and it transforms the input spectrogram into a set of probabilities. So here is the command recognizer. So because interference run multiple times per second, so this recognize command aggregates the results of results and determines on an average whether a known word was had. And the command responder is basically, if a command is heard, it uses the device output capabilities to let the user know. So depending upon the device, this could mean flashing an LED or showing a data on the LCD display. So uh, so I will just give a glimpse on what's going on. I mean, so the basic flow is the same as we have discussed in that Hello World example. So we load the model and set up the interpreter and allocate the tensors. So as you can see here, we just compare the model's version with the TF Lite schema version. So we make sure it is equal, otherwise the model behaves strangely. So, and the only difference we can find here is in the Hello World example, we use the all ops resolver to pull in all of the deep learning operations that might be necessary to run the model. But this is a reliable approach, but it's wasteful because a given model probably doesn't use all of the available operations. So when deployed to a device, so these unnecessary operations will take up a valuable memory. So it's best if you could only use those we need. So for that, we use this micromutable ops resolver, as you can see here. So instead of using that all ops resolver, which pulls all the operations, in order to save space, we use this micromutable op resolver. So it will only pull those operations which we need for this speech processing, wake word detection. So as you can see here, this is the same from our previous discussion. So we allocate the tensor and create the space and all. So here we are dealing with a spectrogram as our input. So the input tensor has more dimensions. So there are total 4 in total. The first one just a wrapper containing a single element here, as you can see, and the rows and the second and third represents the rows and columns of our spectrogram, which happens to be 49 rows and 40 columns. Why it is 4940, I will be coming back to it. The fourth, the innermost dimension of the input tensor, which has a size 1. So here we just grab a spectrogram for S. So we just load it in the input, and we just invoke the interpreter. So here the invoke status, we just compare it with KTF Lite. Okay, if it is equal, okay, it is successful, the invoke is successful. And after that, here After the input has been assigned, we run the interference and inspect the output tensor size and shape. So our output basically has 2 dimensions. The first one is just a wrapper, and the second has 4 elements. Uh, this is the structure that holds the probabilities that each of our 4 classes, that silence, unknown, S, and no, were matched. So here the index of the corresponding silence index, unknown index. Here, which will probably store that probability of that particular silence index, unknown index. We finally just compare with S score and silence score, whichever is greater. So this model is basically represent S. So the S score will be higher compared to the other scores, silence score and unknown score. So this is I've just given an idea. So this is for the same for that no. Here we are loading the sample for no. The same thing.
Gautam, can you explain a bit about the silence score and those scores? One second.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So basically, we are using unsigned int. So if a yes is detected, so it will output a score of more than 200. So the other silent score, unknown score, and no score will be less. So we are just comparing whether the yes score is greater than silent score, comparing with silence, unknown, and no score. So it will output 1 for each of the case. So yes, so in that case, yes is detected.
Okay.
And similarly, it is experimented for no. So the same thing here, we have invoked the interpreter and we are just reading the output probabilities. We are checking, yes.
Okay.
And so the future provider, basically this, as I've told, the future provider which converts the raw audio data into spectrograms. So what it does is to the future provider generally converts this raw audio obtained from the audio provider into spectrograms so that it can be fed into our model. So its job is to populate an array that represents a spectrogram of 1 second of audio. So if you just go through the book, it is detailedly given in chapter 7 and chapter 8. In order to, you can just refer those 2 chapters for this wake word detection. So in that code, so each spectrogram is represented as a 2-dimensional array with 40 columns and 49 rows. So where each row represents a 30 millisecond sample of audio split into 43 frequency buckets. So to create each row, we run a 30 millisecond, as you can see in the figure, 30 millisecond audio input through FFT algorithm. This technique analyzes the frequency distribution of audio on the sample and creates 256 frequency buckets, each with a value between 0 to 255. These are averaged together into a group of 6, so leaving us with 43 buckets. So to build the entire 2-dimensional array, we combine the results of the running FFT on 49 consecutive 30 millisecond slices of audio. So it will overlap. This 30 millisecond window is there, it will overlap. So we have to run it like 49 times in order to cover the whole 1 second audio. So so you can see how this 30 millisecond sample window is moved forward by 20 millisecond each time until it has covered the full 1 second sample. The resulting spectrogram is ready to is passed into the model. So here I've just given an idea about what you have to do. So
Okay, one thing about this last part, this converting audio to spectrogram.
yes,
Okay, maybe some of them, they're not having this background. I don't know if anybody of you not having this background of this FFT, this type of conversion. So this part they can take as a black box, right? Nothing
yes,
to
ma'am.
do.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
The model
That
is
doesn't
already
create.
signed on it. So the model
Yeah,
is
it is
already
already given there. Just for your example, you can take this as a black box. He just explained to, I mean, to make it clear to all of you. But if someone is not having the previous background about this FFT and all these terms, you can skip this and you can think that this as a black box, it is taking the audio part and it is converting. Okay. So
Yes.
I think that is
Yeah.
if
The
without that
actually,
also taking, yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Actually, the model is already trained, so all they have to do is to. So the assignment will be like for on and off. So here I have shown for yes and no. The assignment will be for on and off. So if you say on, the LED should turn on, and if you say off, the LED should turn off. Okay, that will be their assignment. For that, they need to make changes in this command responder. They need not do anything in this part. The model is already trained, so you have to make changes appropriately so that your model just so whenever you say on, the LED just turns on, and when you say off, and just stays like that for 3 seconds, and then turns off when you say off. Is it clear?
yeah. Another thing, I mean, we should mention that they are not having this device with them, right? So they cannot test it. So they should print their output in the console, right?
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
Yeah,
Yes, ma'am. Or they can
and
just give me the code, ma'am, so that I can just run it on my edge device and I will check.
yeah, they can do one. I mean, a separate call with you. I mean, that's my suggestion. That then you will get the feel that since you are not having this actual device, that how your code is running and how your prediction is actually giving the output and switching on and off based on your, I mean, that audio detection. So my suggestion will be when you are checking your code when it is running, I mean, use a print statement and check in the console whether it is working fine or not. And when that is done, you submit that or you send that to Gautam. Maybe you're having our email. So you email us, and then we will when we will be evaluating, you will be there, and then based on that, I mean, in his device, he can check and show you the output, right? Maybe one separate mate link or something. Some one day we can do that.
Yes, ma'am. Maybe a report, we can ask them to write a report, that is also
Yes,
fine.
that everything will be written. What you have to do with the assignment, that in a written assignment part, you can see there. We will upload that formally, step by step, what you have to do. But for the checking purposes, the problem is you are not in this campus, so you cannot check that using the device directly. So at least with that meet link, we can handle that this time.
Yeah.
Okay.
So any doubts? Hello?
Yes, sir. While showing the code on the TF Lite code, you mentioned that the score would be 200, 100. So how are we getting those scores? Because
Actually,
generally
it
the
is
output.
registered in the code.
Okay, okay,
Actually, you can output your own values if you can. There are no restriction like that.
okay. Thank you.
Yeah, so you can go through the chapter 7 and 8. Just get an idea. If you have any doubt, you can just okay, you can just message me anytime. Any more doubts from previous discussion or? So have you guys started trying to set up that? Hello?
So Gautam is asking that have you tested, all of you? Maybe by name I can ask. I can see the names here in the list. So Aishik, Anubhav. So have you tried, tasted?
No, ma'am, not
Not. So Anubhav, have you tried?
Yes, ma'am. I have done some like basic machine learning models,
Hmm.
but I have not specifically tried this Hello World thing because I don't have this Arduino setup at home.
No, you will not have the setup. Yeah, you go through that. Just you can test in only the software part. That's what we are telling because we understand you are out of the campus.
Mhm.
So you can you just write the soft code, okay, and
Hmm.
try to using the console. You just try to print some print statement to check your output. That you do usually the C code also. Okay, and after
Okay.
that, once you are done, you just contact with Gautam. So there you can in the sharing one maybe video call or something. Then you can check that.
Okay. Okay.
So for
Anubhav,
all others also, yeah.
yeah, Anubhav, you can try the training of the model, right? You can at least try the training of the
Yes,
model.
sir.
Yeah.
Sir, I have actually, like we were taught ResNet, so I had implemented a ResNet using both the PyTorch and TensorFlow. So I trained that model to an accuracy of around 90%. So yeah.
Actually, that Google Colab, whatever I have showed in the last demo, so we just asked you to change the number of neurons in the layers and just check what accuracy you are getting. So did you do that?
Sir, I did not particularly do that, but I did
Okay,
some other models.
okay. And what about others? I mean,
For others, who else are there? I can
Sir,
see
sir, I could
Argo,
not find
Oil.
that Python notebook that you have shown that data in the demo.
actually, it is Google Colab. It is, if you have Google account, you can access it. It is for free.
Yeah, I know, like, you showed some like a particular notebook on that day, right? Which had some codes.
Yeah, that is not available. Actually, it is there in the book, test book. You have to go
Okay,
through it.
okay, okay. Yeah,
Okay, chapter 4 and chapter 5. Yeah.
yeah, I found it like a hello world in the tiny
Yeah,
notebook, right? I
yeah,
found it.
yeah. You just go through it. Yeah. If you have any doubt, you can ask me. And, and what about today's discussion? The wake word detection. Okay, clear? I mean, o-
Okay, so Gautam, we can give some time to them. Maybe next week or sometime we will fix a date. So there, we will check how far they have done. Okay. So just
okay,
they
yeah,
that time like we do in the lab also. I mean in our SW lab, we will share a link so that time they will just share and show us what they have done. Maybe then we can test their code in your platform,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
So that way we will set the deadline and by tomorrow we will upload that. Okay.
Okay, yeah. And you can train your own model if you want to train your own model, not only for on and off, for Hey Google. For that, you need to record your voice and train the model. You can even do that if you are interested. Okay, then.
Yes, just set up it and play with the platform. I mean, play with the given code or the sample codes. You will get the idea. That will you can do more. Okay. So at least the demo and the link, etc., that was uploaded in that previous Google link. Maybe Ayan has shared with you. So go through that. If you have any idea, any doubt, then ask maybe next week. Next week you will show us some demo. Okay. So that's all. I think if you do not have any questions, so we can wrap up the class. Thank you.
Ma'am,
Yes.
I was trying to like build a model for one particular purpose, like
Hmm.
which is to identify like there is a satellite imagery and
Okay.
there are
Hmm.
multiple buildings in that picture. So
Hmm.
what we have to do as a part of the like main step is to identify those buildings or
Hmm.
like like do a building thresholding, like colored the buildings with a particular color and the remaining portion will remain black.
Okay.
So I've thought of it that way. Now I've been trying to use ResNet for that particular purpose.
Okay.
Now, ma'am, is there
So
something
why
called
first of all, why have you chosen ResNet? Is there any special problem you have faced with the simpler networks? Have you tried
Ma'am,
with
I've
that?
tried with CNN,
Okay.
but with a normal CNN, like just a normal sum of the layers, like it's giving a lot of noise. So I
Nice.
thought
Okay.
the number of data points is also not very large. It's just 192 images.
Okay. So
So
that way, that highway type of path is important. So you are thinking.
so I was thinking like maybe is there something called inverse max pooling so that I can try and visualize after each convolution layer what features it is detecting.
Okay. Okay. That I will check and share with you. Okay.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. That I will
Thank
share with
you.
you. Okay, that's all right. So if you do not have any further question, you may leave. If you want to ask something about the assignment, you can ask. Anubhav, you asked the question, right? You are working on TensorFlow or FlowLite? Hello.
Ma'am, I think he just left the meeting.
Okay, fine, no problem.